Catching a little twinkle in her friend's eye, Mrs. Symington pushed a little further into the matter. Carolyn, do you really mean exactly like Davy? A little smile hovered around her mouth and she looked pointedly at Randy as she asked the question, sending him to the floor and making his face flame up all over again. Exactly like Davy, Susan. Isn't Randy a little old to be punished like a small child when he misbehaves, Carolyn? Perhaps, Susan, but that's exactly why my method of discipline is so effective with a freshman who still behaves like a 13-year-old from time to time. Since I only punish him when he misbehaves, he can't say he doesn't deserve what he gets or that I'm being unfair. And frankly, it is a lot better than risking a suspension or expulsion from school and jeopardizing the education his mother worked so hard to provide. Isn't that so, Randy? After hesitating, Randy finally replied in a quiet voice without taking his eyes off the carpet. Yes, Aunt Susan. So far, it's worked out very well. Randy learns a good lesson for his little misdemeanors just like Davy. I'm sure he does, Susan. I'm sure he does. I imagine a childish punishment makes quite an impression on a college boy. You put your finger right on it, Susan. I'm sure my methods of punishment are effective for naughty boys of all ages, but they work best with someone who thinks he's too old to be turned over my knee. As with Davy, once Randy's pants come down and his punishment starts, he's just as much a little boy as any child getting a spanking. If you saw the way he carries on, you would understand why my method of punishment works so well. The fact that Randy hasn't started looking for another room also shows he agrees with me, even if he hates to admit it. Isn't that right, Randy? Again Randy's ears flamed dark red as his eyes fell even lower and he began fidgeting. Sit still, child. You know I don't like it when you fidget. Randy stopped shaking his leg but kept his eyes on the floor. So you see, Susan, ever since our agreement a month ago, it's just like having another teenage son around the house. Davy knows I plan to continue disciplining him as long as he's living in my house. Despite his age, he accepts my approach completely and even prefers it to have his allowance cut or getting grounded for an extended period like his friends. It makes sense when you think about it. A spanking allows him to get his punishment over quickly so he can return to his regular routines and privileges. You don't have to sell me on that argument, Carolyn, since you know how I treat Charlie and he's the same age as Davy. Randy's not bad, Susan, just immature and in need of strict guidelines backed up by firm discipline. If more mothers spanked their boys through high school and into college when necessary, we wouldn't have half the problems with truancy, delinquency, and underage drinking. That's exactly the way I feel, Carolyn. Does Davy get into more trouble now that Randy is here? Yes, he does, Susan, and vice versa as well. It's the same as it is anywhere else. Two boys are always more than twice the trouble of one. Though Davy's influence makes Randy even more immature, I find I can handle him just fine thanks to our new understanding. If he were in one of those awful dorms, he'd be in much worse trouble with all the drinking they do. A strict house mother in each dorm would soon put an end to that if the parents would allow it. I'm afraid it's the permissive parents who are to blame for most of the problems teenagers get into these days.